boys and slaughtered them. Hell, if you could see my schedule, my work schedule, you know damn well that I was never out there.
Well, you were indicted, convicted, and sentenced on 33 counts of homicide. Is that correct?
That's correct. I thought there was nothing down in the crawl space.
Yeah.
I had never had any qualms about them going down in the crawl space.
Well, how many bodies were actually located on the property, and where?
To my understanding, there was a total of 29 bodies, or 28 bodies were found on the property. 27 of them under the house.
And the rest?
One was under the driveway, one was under the garage. So that makes a total of 29.
Okay.
December 1978. Investigators crawl beneath a suburban Chicago house and immediately know the smell is unmistakable. They start digging. One body, then another. By the end, 29 corpses pulled from the crawl space. The homeowner? John Wayne Gacy, a contractor who threw block parties, entertained kids at hospitals as Pogo the Clown, and seemed like the perfect neighbor. Over 6 years, he murdered 33 young men and boys. Most were buried right under his house. What's truly chilling? Nobody suspected a thing. The friendly guy next door was one of America's most prolific serial killers, hiding in plain sight. John Wayne Gacy Jr. was born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, into what appeared from the outside to be a typical working-class American family. His father, John Stanley Gacy, was a World War I veteran who worked as a machinist and auto repair businessman. His mother, Marion Elaine Robinson, was a homemaker who desperately tried to hold together a family that was quietly falling apart behind closed doors. Young John was the second of 3 children, with an older sister named Joanne and a younger sister named Karen. But the Gacy household was far from the American dream. John Wayne Gacy Sr. was an alcoholic with a violent temper and impossibly high standards. He was the kind of father who saw weakness in everything his son did, who wielded his belt as readily as his words, and who made it clear that young John would never measure up to his expectations. The elder Gacy would beat his son with a razor strap for perceived failures, call him dumb and stupid, and regularly tell him he would probably grow up queer because the boy wasn't tough enough, wasn't masculine enough, wasn't anything enough. Young John tried desperately to win his father's approval. He joined the Boy Scouts, worked odd jobs, and attempted to be the son his father wanted. But nothing was ever good enough. When John was 11 years old, he was struck in the head by a swing, causing a blood clot in his brain that wasn't discovered until he was 16. During those 5 years, he suffered unexplained blackouts and seizures. His father accused him of faking the episodes to get attention, calling him weak and pathetic. Even after the blood clot was discovered and dissolved with medication, the damage to John's psyche had been done. The relationship between John and his father became the defining trauma of his early life. He both craved his father's love and resented him with a burning intensity. This toxic dynamic would echo through every relationship John would have for the rest of his life. A desperate need for approval mixed with a deep-seated rage that would eventually find its outlet in the most horrific ways imaginable. Despite the chaos at home, young John learned to wear a mask. He was sociable, even charming when he wanted to be. He involved himself in community activities, joined civic organizations, and learned the art of presenting a likable public persona. This would become his greatest weapon, the ability to seem completely normal, even admirable, while hiding the darkness growing inside him. In his teenage years, John struggled with his sexuality, something that filled him with shame, given his father's constant accusations and the conservative values of 1950s America. He experienced sexual confusion, having encounters with men while simultaneously trying to present as heterosexual. This internal conflict would become another piece of the psychological puzzle that was John Wayne Gacy, a man at war with himself, unable to reconcile who he was with who he thought he should be. After high school, Gacy attended business college and eventually found work in the shoe business. He was good at sales, good with people, and seemed to be making something of himself. In 1964, at age 22, he married Marlyn Myers, whose father owned a string of Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa. Gacy moved to Waterloo to manage 3 of these restaurants, and for a while, it seemed like he had finally achieved the normal life he'd been striving for. He and Marlyn had 2 children, a son and a daughter, and Gacy threw himself into community involvement, joining the JCs and becoming a respected member of the community. But the mask was already beginning to crack. In Waterloo, Iowa, John Wayne Gacy appeared to be a model citizen, or so it seemed. He was voted Outstanding Vice President of the JCs, organized community events, and earned a reputation as a hard-working and ambitious young businessman. He managed several local restaurants and often worked long hours. But behind this image of success and community involvement, troubling behavior was beginning to surface. Gacy began acting inappropriately toward some of the young men who worked for him. At first, these incidents were dismissed or misunderstood. Over time, however, his actions grew increasingly manipulative. He invited local teenagers to his home, where he created a so-called club, offering them alcohol and attention while taking advantage of their trust. His manipulation was deliberate and strategic. Gacy often focused on individuals from unstable backgrounds, presenting himself as a mentor or friend. He used that position of trust to exploit and control them, and then intimidated them into silence by convincing them that no one would believe their accounts. In 1968, his double life began to unravel. A teenager reported that Gacy had harmed him, leading to an investigation. It later emerged that Gacy had asked another young man to help lure and intimidate the victim in an attempt to prevent testimony. This episode revealed something critical about Gacy's personality. He was not acting impulsively, but calculatingly. He manipulated others, concealed evidence, and sought to control every aspect of the situation. His actions showed a deep lack of empathy and a willingness to exploit anyone who stood in his way. In December 1968, John Wayne Gacy was convicted of sodomy and sentenced to 10 years in the Anamosa State Penitentiary in Iowa. His wife Marlyn divorced him, and he lost access to his children. His father, perhaps in his only moment of emotional honesty, died of cirrhosis before Gacy went to prison. Never having reconciled with his son, Gacy later said that his greatest regret was that his father died before he could prove he was successful. But prison didn't reform John Wayne Gacy. Instead, it educated him. In prison, Gacy became a model inmate. He joined the prison JC chapter, worked in the kitchen, and managed the inmates' commissary. He was so well behaved that he was released on parole in June 1970, after serving only 18 months of his 10-year sentence. To everyone watching, it seemed like Gacy had learned his lesson and deserved a second chance. But what Gacy actually learned in prison was how to avoid getting caught. He learned that maintaining a sterling public reputation was crucial. He learned that he needed to be more careful about his victims, more selective, more secretive. He didn't learn to stop. He learned to hide better. Within months of his release, Gacy was arrested again, this time for sexually assaulting a teenage boy in Iowa. But the boy didn't show up to court, and the charges were dropped. The system had given Gacy another pass, and he took it as a sign that he could outsmart everyone. In 1971, Gacy moved back to Chicago and bought a house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in unincorporated Norwood Park Township. It was a modest ranch-style home in a middle-class neighborhood, exactly the kind of place where nothing terrible was supposed to happen. He started a construction business called PDM Contractors. The letters stood for painting, decorating, and maintenance. And once again, he threw himself into community involvement with almost manic energy. Gacy joined the Norwood Park Township JCs and quickly became an influential member. He organized elaborate fundraising events, often hosting parties that drew hundreds of people. He created Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown characters, performing at children's hospitals, fundraisers, and street parties. The irony was lost on no one later. This man who hurt children dressed up to entertain them. In 1972, Gacy married Carol Hoff, a divorcee with 2 daughters whom he had known in high school. To the neighbors, they seemed like a normal family. Gacy was the guy who organized the annual summer block parties, who helped with neighborhood projects, who seemed to be living the American dream. He was photographed with First Lady Rosalind Carter at a Democratic Party fundraiser, proudly displaying his S security clearance pin that allowed him to meet her. But Carol saw the cracks in the mask. Gacy was hardly ever home, working late nights on construction projects. The marriage was sexless. Gacy told her he was bisexual and wasn't attracted to her. Strange young men came and went from the house at odd hours. And there was the smell. A terrible smell that seemed to come from the crawl space beneath the house. Gacy told her it was a moisture problem, a sewage issue, something he'd fix eventually. The smell was death. The exact moment John Wayne Gacy became a murderer is uncertain, but investigators believe his first kill occurred in January 1972, just months after buying his Summerdale house. The victim was Timothy McCoy, a 16-year-old from Michigan who was passing through Chicago on his way home from a family vacation. Gacy encountered McCoy at the Greyhound bus station and offered him a place to stay for the night. According to Gacy's later confession, he woke up to find McCoy standing in the doorway of his bedroom with a knife. In a panic, Gacy claimed he wrestled the knife away and stabbed McCoy to death. Only afterward did he realize that McCoy had simply been making breakfast and had brought the knife upstairs to show Gacy where he'd found it in the kitchen. Whether this story is true, or just Gacy's attempt to paint his first murder as self-defense, we'll never know. But what happened next revealed the true monster. After killing McCoy, Gacy experienced what he later described as an orgasm. The act of killing, the total control over another person's life, the power of it. It excited him sexually. This was the moment the psychological switch flipped. Gacy had discovered that murder fulfilled something deep and dark within him, something all the community awards and political handshakes could never satisfy. He buried McCoy's body in the crawl space beneath his house, covering it with lime to accelerate decomposition and mask the smell. And then he went back to his normal life as if nothing had happened. Over the next 6 years, John Wayne Gacy took the lives of at least 32 young men and boys. He developed a consistent pattern that allowed him to continue committing his crimes while maintaining the outward appearance of a successful businessman and respected community member. Gacy often targeted individuals who were especially vulnerable. Teenagers and young men who were transient, struggling financially, or lacking stable support systems. Many were offered short-term work through his contracting business, PDM contractors. Others he encountered in public places where people frequently came and went, making it easier for him to conceal his actions. He used a variety of deceptive tactics to lure victims to his home, presenting himself as friendly and generous. Once they were there, Gacy would use manipulation and coercion to gain control over them. His crimes were carefully planned and driven by a desire for dominance and power rather than impulse. Tragically, many of his victims were never seen alive again. Gacy concealed their remains within his home, hiding the evidence in the crawl space beneath the house. When the smell eventually drew suspicion, he dismissed it as a plumbing issue or the result of animals beneath the property. Gacy's ability to lead a double life, appearing as a civic-minded entrepreneur while secretly carrying out these atrocities, made him one of the most disturbing figures in American criminal history. His case became a landmark example in criminal psychology and law enforcement, illustrating how manipulation, charm, and control can mask unimaginable wrongdoing. Throughout this period, Gacy's public life continued to flourish. In 1975, he was appointed director of Chicago's annual Polish Constitution Day Parade, organizing an event that drew thousands. He was named Man of the Year by the Jaycees. He had his photograph taken with politicians and celebrities. He performed as Pogo the Clown at children's parties and charity events, his painted smile hiding unspeakable horrors. His employees at PDM contractors noticed odd things. Young workers would suddenly quit or disappear without collecting their final paychecks. There were strange smells coming from Gacy's house. Sometimes Gacy would have them dig trenches in the crawl space for plumbing work that never seemed to get done. But Gacy was the boss, and he paid well, so they didn't ask too many questions. Carol Hoff divorced him in 1976. She couldn't reconcile the man she thought she married with the reality of who he was. The sexless marriage, the strange visitors, the lies, the smell. It was too much. But even she didn't realize the true horror of what was happening in that house. She just knew something was deeply wrong. After the divorce, with no one to hide from, Gacy's killing accelerated. He was murdering someone almost monthly now, sometimes more often. The crawl space was completely full, so he began throwing bodies into the Des Plaines River instead. But this was riskier. Bodies in water could be found, could be traced. The crawl space had been perfect because no one would ever think to look there. By 1978, Gacy had killed 33 young men and boys. The crawl space contained 29 bodies. 4 more had been thrown into the Des Plaines River. And he might have continued indefinitely if not for one determined mother and the disappearance of a 15-year-old boy named Robert Piest. On December 11, 1978, Robert Piest was a 15-year-old honor student who worked part-time at a pharmacy in Des Plaines, Illinois, to save money for Christmas. His mother, Elizabeth Piest, came to pick him up from work that evening. Robert told her to wait a moment. A contractor who was remodeling the pharmacy wanted to talk to him about a summer job that paid $5 an hour, almost double what he was making at the pharmacy. The contractor's name was John Wayne Gacy. Robert went outside to talk to Gacy. He never came back. When Robert didn't return, Elizabeth immediately knew something was wrong. This wasn't like Robert. He was responsible, reliable, and he had been excited about his birthday the next day. She reported him missing that same night, and the Des Plaines police began investigating immediately. Lieutenant Joseph Kozenchak caught the case. When he learned that a contractor named John Gacy had been at the pharmacy and was the last person to talk to Robert, he looked into Gacy's background. What he found was alarming. A 1968 conviction for sodomy in Iowa, an arrest in 1971 for sexual assault that never went to trial, and various other complaints and concerns that had never resulted in charges. Kozenchak obtained a search warrant for Gacy's house and car. On December 13th, investigators searched the property, but found nothing obviously incriminating. However, they did find several suspicious items: books on homosexuality, pornography, a piece of jewelry that didn't seem to belong to Gacy, marijuana, and police badges. They also noticed the smell. That terrible smell that Gacy claimed was from moisture and sewage problems. But they didn't find Robert Piest. Frustrated, but not discouraged, Kozenchak made a decision that would ultimately save lives. He assigned officers to conduct round-the-clock surveillance on Gacy too. Officers would follow him everywhere, watching his every move, letting him know he was being watched. The theory was simple. If Gacy was responsible for Robert's disappearance, the constant surveillance would prevent him from killing again and might pressure him into making a mistake. Gacy complained about the harassment. He hired lawyers, made calls to politicians he knew, tried to use his connections to get the police to back off. But Kozenchak wouldn't budge. The surveillance continued. The watching officers noticed odd behavior. Gacy would drive to seemingly random locations and sit in his car, sometimes for hours. He would break down crying in front of them. He would rage at them, then try to befriend them, inviting them into his house for drinks. He gave them marijuana joints. He talked endlessly, rambling about his business, his past, his life. Everything except what had happened to Robert Piest. The psychological pressure was working. Gacy was unraveling. On December 18th, officers noticed a terrible smell coming from Gacy's car. When they investigated, They found it was permeated with the stench of decomposition. Gacy claimed he had been driving to work sites, that the smell was from sewage work. But the officers knew better. On December 21, 1978, investigators obtained a second search warrant for Gacy's house, this time more specific in what they were looking for. They brought in cadaver dogs, and the dogs immediately alerted in the crawl space beneath the house. Gacy knew it was over. That evening, while sitting with his lawyers at a restaurant, he admitted everything he told them about the bodies in the crawl space. He told them about the killings. He told them he was through. His lawyers contacted the police. In the early morning hours of December 22nd, investigators began excavating the crawl space. What they found was beyond comprehension. Bodies everywhere, some decomposed beyond recognition, some stacked on top of each other, all crammed into the small space beneath the house. The smell was so overwhelming that investigators could only work for short periods before needing to come up for air. Some would never forget that smell, carrying it with them for the rest of their lives. As the bodies were recovered one by one, Gacy sat in an interrogation room and confessed in detail. He showed no remorse, spoke of the victims as if they were objects, described his crimes with a chilling matter-of-factness. He drew diagrams showing where he had buried bodies in the crawl space. He claimed he had multiple personalities, that Jack had committed the murders, not him. He said he was a victim of his own mental illness, but the investigators saw through it. This wasn't mental illness. This was evil, pure and calculated evil. The excavation continued for days. 26 bodies were eventually recovered from the crawl space, along with additional remains that would bring the total to 29. 3 more bodies were found in other parts of Gacy's property. 4 more victims were recovered from the Des Plaines River, where Gacy had dumped them when the crawl space became too full. 33 victims in total. 33 young lives ended by one man's depravity. John Wayne Gacy's trial began on February 6, 1980. His defense team attempted to argue that he was insane, that he couldn't be held responsible for his actions due to mental illness. They brought in psychiatrists who diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and other conditions, but the prosecution's case was overwhelming. Victim after victim was identified. Families testified about their lost sons, brothers, friends. The evidence was incontrovertible. The bodies, the testimony, Gacy's own confessions. The prosecution argued that Gacy knew exactly what he was doing, that his crimes were too carefully planned and executed to be the work of someone who was legally insane. The jury agreed. On March 13, 1980, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, they found Gacy guilty of 33 counts of murder. He was sentenced to death. Gacy spent 14 years on death row in Illinois. During that time, he gave interviews, painted artwork that would later be sold, and often burned by those who found it offensive, and maintained that he was innocent, that others had committed the murders, that he was a victim of circumstance. He showed no genuine remorse, no real acceptance of what he had done. He appealed his convictions repeatedly, using every legal avenue available. But the evidence was too strong, the crimes too clear. The appeals failed. On May 10, 1994, at the Stateville Correctional Center in Illinois, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection. He was 52 years old. His final words were reportedly, "Kiss my ass," a final act of defiance and contempt for the system that had finally held him accountable. Between 1972 and 1978, in the suburbs of Chicago, 33 young lives were stolen by a man who hid behind the mask of respectability. John Wayne Gacy presented himself as a pillar of his community, a successful contractor, a Democratic Party volunteer, and Pogo the Clown, who entertained children at hospitals. But beneath this facade lived one of America's most prolific serial killers. This is not his story. This is theirs. The young men and boys who deserved futures, who had families who loved them, who had dreams that were never realized. Of the 33 victims, 9 remain unidentified to this day. But through decades of investigation, 24 have been returned to their families with their names restored. Timothy Jack McKay, age 15. Timothy McCoy was traveling alone from Michigan to Omaha in 1972 when he met Gacy at the Chicago Greyhound bus station. Gacy offered him a place to stay for the night. Timothy was Gacy's first known victim, a teenager far from home who accepted what seemed like a kind gesture from a stranger. His remains were identified in 1978. Timothy had his whole life ahead of him. John Butkovich, age 17. John Butkovich worked for Gacy's construction company. In July 1975, he went to Gacy's home to collect back wages he was owed, money for honest work he had completed. His family reported him missing immediately, but police failed to seriously investigate Gacy, despite the clear connection. John was found buried beneath Gacy's garage. He had simply wanted to be paid for his labor. Darrell Sampson, age 18. Darrell Sampson disappeared in April 1976. Little is known about his final hours, but his family never stopped searching for answers. Randall Reffett, age 15. 15-year-old Randall Reffett vanished in May 1976. He was just beginning high school, at an age when life's possibilities should have been expanding before him. Samuel Stapleton, age 14. Samuel Stapleton disappeared on May 14, 1976. At only 14, he was among the youngest of Gacy's victims, a child taken before he could even imagine the life he might lead. Michael Bonin, age 17. Michael Bonin was last seen in June 1976. He was 17, on the cusp of adulthood, with dreams and plans that would never come to fruition. William Carroll, age 16. 16-year-old William Carroll disappeared on June 13, 1976. His family held on to hope for years before learning the terrible truth. James Byron Hakinson, age 16. James Jimmy Hawkinson left his home in Minnesota and made his way to Chicago in August 1976. Seeking opportunities, he called his mother to tell her he was all right. It was the last time she heard his voice. Jimmy's remains weren't identified until 2017, 41 years after his death, through DNA technology. His family finally had answers after 4 decades of wondering. Rick Johnston, age 17. Rick Johnston disappeared on August 6, 1976. He was 17 years old, with a future waiting for him that he would never see. Kenneth Parker, age 16. 16-year-old Kenneth Parker vanished in October 1976. He was a teenager navigating the challenges of adolescence when his life was cut short. Michael Marino, age 14. Michael Marino was only 14 when he disappeared on October 25, 1976. A child, taken while most boys his age were focused on school, friends, and growing up. Gregory Godzik, age 17. Gregory Godzik worked for Gacy's construction firm. In December 1976, he told his girlfriend he was going to see Gacy about a job he never returned. Gregory's disappearance, like John Butkovich's before him, pointed directly to Gacy. Yet authorities failed to connect the pattern. John SSYC, age 19. 19-year-old John Sizik disappeared in January 1977. After his disappearance, his 1971 Plymouth Satellite was sold with forged signatures. The car became evidence, but John was already gone. John Prestige, age 20. John Prestige was 20 years old when he vanished in March 1977. He was starting his adult life, with experiences and accomplishments still ahead of him. Matthew Bowman, age 19. Matthew Bowman disappeared in July 1977 at age 19. He had made it to adulthood, but barely had a chance to live it. Robert Gilroy, age 18. Robert Gilroy was 18 and had just started working when he vanished on September 15, 1977. He was last seen in uptown Chicago, a young man trying to make his way in the world. John Mowry, age 19. John Mowry disappeared on September 25, 1977. He was 19, at an age when life's adventures were just beginning. Russell Nelson, age 21. 21-year-old Russell Nelson vanished in October 1977. He had crossed into full adulthood with independence and possibility before him. Robert Winch, age 16. Robert Winch was 16 when he disappeared on November 10, 1977. He was a teenager who should have had years of growth and discovery ahead. Tommy Bowling, age 20. Tommy Bowling was 20 years old when he vanished in November 1977. He had his whole adult life waiting for him. David Talsma, age 19. David Talsma disappeared on December 9, 1977. He was 19, with dreams and goals that would remain forever unfulfilled. William Kindred, age 19. William Kindred vanished in February 1978 at age 19. He was building his adult life when it was stolen from him. Timothy O'Rourke, age 20. 20-year-old Timothy O'Rourke disappeared in June 1978. He had reached adulthood, but would never experience the fullness of it. Frank Landingen, age 19. Frankie Landingen was 19 when he disappeared on November 4, 1978. He was the last identified victim found at Gacy's property, a young man whose potential was extinguished just as he was stepping into adulthood. Robert Peast, age 15. 15-year-old Robert Peast would become the case that finally brought Gacy to justice. On December 11, 1978, Robert was working at a pharmacy when Gacy came in. Robert told his mother he was going to talk to a contractor about a job that paid better than his current position. He said he'd be right back. He never returned. But Robert's mother, Elizabeth Peast, refused to let her son become another forgotten missing person. She pushed investigators relentlessly. Finally, police took the connection to Gacy seriously. The surveillance of Gacy that followed led to a search warrant, and what they found was a house of horrors. Robert's body was recovered from the Des Plaines River. He had been killed just hours after he went missing. Robert's disappearance and his mother's determination saved countless future victims. The unidentified 9 victims remain nameless. They are sometimes referred to only as victim, followed by a number, a designation that strips them of their humanity. But each was a person. Each had a name that someone called them by. Each had people who loved them. Through DNA technology and forensic genealogy, investigators continue working to identify them and return them to their families. These unidentified victims haunt the case, not as ghosts, but as unfinished business. Somewhere, families may still be wondering. Somewhere, questions remain unanswered. In 2011, Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart launched a renewed effort to identify the remaining victims using modern DNA technology. Several identifications have been made in recent years, including James Hackinson in 2017 and Francis Wayne Alexander in 2021. Proof that it's never too late to restore a name and bring closure to a family. The work continues. For the families of Gacy's victims, the pain never ends. Many spent years not knowing what happened to their sons, brothers, and friends. When the bodies were discovered, some found closure in finally knowing the truth, as horrible as it was. Others faced a different agony. Their loved ones among the 8 unidentified victims, forever nameless, their remains lying in graves marked only with numbers. To this day, forensic anthropologists and genealogists continue working to identify the remaining victims. Modern DNA technology and genealogical databases have renewed hope that these young men might finally be given their names back, that their families might finally know what happened to them. The Gacy case changed American law enforcement forever. It revealed how a serial killer could operate in plain sight, hidden behind a facade of normalcy and community respectability. It showed how vulnerable young people, especially runaways and those living on society's margins, could disappear without sufficient alarm being raised. The investigation led to changes in how missing persons cases are handled, particularly those involving young people. It highlighted the importance of taking every missing person report seriously, of looking deeper when patterns emerge, of not dismissing disappearances as runaways without proper investigation. The case also revealed the psychological profile of a certain type of serial killer, the organized, methodical predator who maintains a dual life, who uses charm and social standing as camouflage, who carefully selects victims who won't be immediately missed or whose disappearances won't immediately point back to them. Perhaps the most culturally lasting impact of John Wayne Gacy was the association he created between clowns and horror. Before Gacy, Clowns were primarily seen as children's entertainment, whimsical figures meant to bring joy and laughter. After Gacy, killer clown became a trope. Coulrophobia, fear of clowns, became more widely recognized. John Wayne Gacy died in 1994, but the ripples of his crimes continue to spread. Families still mourn. Investigators still work to identify the remaining victims. Society still grapples with the questions his case raises. How do we identify predators before they kill? How do we protect the vulnerable? How do we see through the masks that monsters wear? There are no easy answers. But perhaps the most important thing we can do is remember. Remember the victims by name when we can. Remember that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like your neighbor, your coworker, the person making children laugh at a party. Remember that when someone vulnerable goes missing, it matters. Remember that justice, even when delayed, even when it comes too late for the victims, still matters. The house at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue was demolished in 1979, and the lot sat empty for years because no one wanted to build there. Eventually, new houses were built, new families moved in, trying to erase the horror of what happened in that place. But the memory remains. The names of the victims remain. The lessons learned from their deaths remain. John Wayne Gacy is dead and gone. But the 33 young people he murdered are not forgotten. Their stories matter. Their lives mattered. And their deaths changed America forever, forcing us to look at evil not as something foreign and distant, but as something that can exist right next door, hiding behind a smile, a handshake, and a clown costume. You've just watched Downfall, Inside the Criminal Mind. If this case gripped you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think drives a person to such darkness? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps uncover the next descent into madness. Coming next, Aileen Wuornos, the woman who killed for love.